Do you think he knew that he lost the election?
Do I personally believe that? Yeah, at first I wasn't sure, but I have come to believe that he knew well that he had lost the election. And now, what I think is important is the government has assumed the burden of proving that. The government, in their indictment, takes the position that he had actual knowledge that he had lost the election and the election wasn't stolen through fraud. And they're going to have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Which is a high bar, of course.
That's a high bar. Now, that leads me to believe that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg on this.
You think Jack Smith has more?
Oh, yes. I would believe he has a lot more. And that's one of the things that impressed me about the indictment. It was very spare. And there were a lot of things he could have said in there. And I think there's a lot more to come. And I think they have a lot more evidence as to President Trump's state of mind.
Donald Trump's former attorney general with an ominous prediction for the former president in the 2020 election case. It comes as Trump faces arraignment today in federal court in Washington. We'll get a live report from Washington, D.C., and legal analysis on what we can expect from today's hearing. Meanwhile, former Vice President Mike Pence just gave his most direct criticism of his former boss. We'll play those comments for you. Also ahead, the new reporting on a private meeting between President Biden and former President Obama over concerns about the 2024 election. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Thursday, August 3rd. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have the host of Way Too Early, White House Bureau Chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire, former U.S. Attorney and senior FBI official Chuck Rosenberg, congressional investigations reporter for the Washington Post, Jackie Alemany, and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post, Eugene Robinson.
So, Willie, yesterday I expected to hear, I think we all expected to hear the best that the Trump defense team had, the best that the Trump apologists and the media had. And man, if that was the best they got, Donald Trump's in really big trouble because, first of all, as Barr said, it's the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be so much more coming in here. It was a very spare indictment to get things moving, but there's so much more to be seen. But we saw Savannah Guthrie. We're going to be playing the clip in a second. We saw Savannah Guthrie interview Trump's lawyer. They're still talking about the First Amendment when on the very face of the Jack Smith indictment, Jack Smith said, you have a First Amendment right to say what you want to say. You even have a First Amendment right to lie. You do not have, though, a First Amendment right to commit a conspiracy to overthrow the federal government of the United States. I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. So they're either talking about the First Amendment or over on another news channel, some people were sitting there talking about a two-tiered justice system and talking about Hunter Biden's hubcap rolling off his 67 Impala or something. I mean, we just heard it. We just heard it. That was bad. A 67 Impala, those hubcaps, they bounce the right way, they can take out an eye. But they're talking about this two-tier system. And as we've said, and I may have said it a little harshly yesterday when I said we don't care if Hunter Biden goes to jail. I didn't mean it that way. What I meant was if he's done something, if he's found guilty, he goes to jail. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's what we do in America. Yeah. But for some reason, they can't say if Donald Trump's done something, if he's guilty, he should go to jail. So they're still, this is what, again, we talked about it yesterday. It is amazing to me that these people, Kevin McCarthy and people on another cable news station, spent from Election Day 2020 to January 6th undermining confidence in America's voting system, in American democracy. It's ended up costing them $1 billion. It'll end up probably cost them closer to $2 billion. But they did that, and they haven't learned their lesson. Now, that Donald Trump, it's like they're willing to just totally screw America. They're to trash America for this guy. I don't want to see his face. Take him down. I don't want to see his face. Take him down. I don't want to see his face. Now they're willing to trash America. They've already trashed democracy for that guy. And if you listen to him yesterday, if you listen to Republicans in the House, if you listen to people on other news channels, they're literally willing to trash America's judiciary. Our judicial branch, the very branch in Madisonian democracy that separates us from other countries the most, if you follow history. It's always the great leveler. They're willing to trash that now, Willie. Just because Donald Trump got caught stealing nuclear secrets, because he got caught stealing secret war plans, because he got caught stealing all of these other documents and burrowed them away in his beach club in Florida. And now they get, I don't know if I told you this, we've got a 45-page indictment, and everybody in here that's testifying against Donald Trump, they're all Trumpers. There are no Democrats here.
Citizens.
They're citizens.
Servants.
They're public servants who were serving Donald Trump. People that said we really wanted him to win badly, but not so badly that we were willing to destroy the United States Constitution and American democracy in the process. And as we said yesterday, every one of these people that testified were testifying against their own self-interest, because if Donald Trump had been in the White House 4 more years, they would have gotten more powerful, ultimately more richer, and more well-connected in Washington and the world. So there you go. Networks and little members of Congress in the Republican Party willing to trash American democracy and now the judicial system in the name of Donald Trump.
And they've been,
badly.
how many off-ramps, Joe? How many times have they been given the chance? Big
many.
chances. Like he took nuclear secrets and war plans to Mar-a-Lago and waved them around at his beach club or at Bedminster. No, that was a bookkeeping issue. Okay, how about an attempted coup against the government as detailed in this 45-page indictment? But what about Hunter Biden? And by the way, that is the political defense. What you're hearing on Capitol Hill from Republicans is, well, yes, we heard about the indictment, but did you hear what Hunter Biden did? Did you hear what this new witness said? Attempting to draw some equivalency there. And you're right, on the legal front, Donald Trump's new attorney, John Lauro, was on several networks, including NBC News yesterday morning, and the defense is the First Amendment. Above the fold, New York Times, First Amendment is likely linchpin of Trump defense. That's where they're going, Joe. But as we talked about at length yesterday, and you just reminded us, in paragraph 3, I think it is, maybe 4, Special Counsel Jack Smith takes that away from them by conceding, yes, you had the right to say all these things, including lies, as he put it. You can say whatever you want. What you can't do is conduct a criminal conspiracy. And speech is often part of a criminal conspiracy.
Willie, let me read it really quickly, and thank you, because as you know, I am a dumb country lawyer. I like waving things around. I don't know exactly where they are, but thank you for telling me it's paragraph 3. Thank you for bird dogging it for me. All right. I'm sorry, I regress at times. Paragraph 3, the defendant had a right, says Jack Smith, like every American, to speak publicly about the election, and even claimed falsely that there had been outcome-determinative fraud during the election and he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means by seeking recounts, et cetera, et cetera. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods in testing the election results. His efforts to change outcomes in these recounts, audits, legal challenge, though, were uniformly unsuccessful. So he had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and to even claim falsely, Willie, that there'd been election fraud. He has that right if he wants to do it. He has that right. And so Jack Smith gets rid of that, as you say, in the 3rd paragraph. And these bumbling lawyers are going around going First Amendment, First Amendment. Judge and a jury is going to look at it and they're going to say, well, wait, Jack Smith talks about that in the 3rd paragraph. So I don't know. I guess they just have absolutely nothing to defend him on.